This episode of Around the Layout is powered by Rapido Trains.
Buying Rapido trains will make you happy.
Rapido's going back to the 90s for the return of the Mac. SD70 Macs in both HO and N scale in variations you've never seen before. Whether it's coal or racks, you need a 70 Mac. Check out all of the details at rapidotrains.com. Around the Layout podcast is heading to Chattanooga for the 2026 National Train Show, appearing in conjunction with Spring Creek Model Trains. Come check out everything Spring Creek has to offer, from the latest releases to the wide selection of models, supplies, and outstanding service that make them a favorite across the hobby. Whether in Deschler, Nebraska, Chattanooga, Tennessee, or at train shows coast to coast, stop in and say wow. Attention Proto Throttle users. If you've ever wanted to have your throttle fit more comfortably in your hand and change the batteries without removing the throttle's case, now you can. Introducing the Narrow Throttle, a new product developed by Scott Thornton that reduces the size of the Proto Throttle by over 25%. Log on to narrowthrottle.square.site to learn more. That's narrowthrottle.square.site. Enjoy more comfort and never have to open the case again. ATLP Extra is our monthly newsletter delivered right to your inbox each month. Sign up for free at atlpextra.com. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Around the Layout, where model railroaders come to tell their story. My name is Ray Arnott. So glad you could join us. Railroad prototype modelers meets are often associated with research, craftsmanship, accuracy, and highly detailed models. But this year, the St. Louis RPM is putting the focus on what happens after the model is built. The 2026 theme is Operation, the key to modeling your prototype, and that opens up the door to a much bigger conversation. What is the purpose of a railroad? What traffic does the industries generate? What's in that rail car, and where is it going? And how does understanding those answers and more make us better prototype modelers? To help answer that, we're joined by Lonnie Bathurst from the St. Louis RPM and Rick Watson, president of OPSIG, to explore why operations belong at a railroad prototype modelers meet. Lonnie, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ray. It's good to be here.
And Rick, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Ray. Appreciate it.
Great to have you both here to have a conversation about the St. Louis RPM and the plans that your folks are making. But before we dive into the 2026 St. Louis RPM, why don't we get to know you folks a little bit better? Lonnie, why don't we start with you? Tell us what your role is with the St. Louis RPM.
Well, I have several jobs. As far as filling out the application for a checking account, they call me president. In terms of what I do, I seem to produce the thing. Beyond that, there are lots of people that do lots of things. Once I get to the point where we have clinics and exhibitors and lots of other things lined up, Jeff Kubler takes over and actually runs the registration process. So that's my title, and that's kind of my function.
And how long have you been doing this for the St. Louis RPM, Lonnie?
I actually started year one by mistake with John Golden. I showed up on game day to unload trailers from a rented Boy Scout trailer, those 8-foot folding monsters, in the heat of a July day, and then skipped a year or so and came back probably in year 3 and been there ever since. This is our 19th year. And
Rick, tell us your role with OPSIG.
Well, I am the current OPSIG president. So the OPSIG is an international group, operations-related folks, or Operations Special Interest Group is the official name. We go by OPSIG. I've been president now for 3 years, and we're doing a lot of really cool things. Our membership has been growing about 10% per year, so we're close to 1,400 members globally.
3 years as president. How long have you been involved with OPSIG overall?
I've been involved with OPSIG about 5 years on the board of directors, and probably 20 years as a member. So I've been a member much longer than a leader, if you will.
Yeah, so somebody who's been around OPSIG a long time, we're going to get into OPSIG and how your role with the St. Louis RPM this year and how that all came about. But we'll start with Lonnie. Lonnie, for someone who has never attended the St. Louis RPM, tell us, what is this meet all about?
I think it's a perfect combination of models on display, clinics for exhibitors, for model builders to show their model in any stage, all of those other things. But it's really to gather those people who want to make their model, their layout, their operation more prototypically correct.
19 years doing this, the RPM, and now largest and I think the largest running RPM in the country. What led you to choose Operation, the key to modeling your prototype, as this year's theme?
I think that we evolved through several other topics: grain, coal, passenger operations, that sort of thing. And I just came to the conclusion it was time to put all that together and try to get the attendees to understand the significance of that component after they know something about the other components. Plus, as a selfish interest, as I build my new layout, I have a lot to learn about operations. So I turned to Rick and his group several years ago at it was an Indianapolis located NMRA RPM joint meet. And I think that's where I joined. I might have joined before then, but anyway, about that time.
When people hear RPM, they're thinking of the models and the prototype research and the historical societies, and now with the learning stations that you've been doing for quite some time, and we'll get into more detail on that later on. But they probably have come accustomed to this whole thing of RPMs. Talk about how operations is going to enhance that, something a little different this year.
In my opinion, I was asked that by friends who care nothing about the hobby and asked me about what I was doing this year. And I said, we seem to all evolve, whether Grandpa took you down to the station and you saw trains for the first time, or you had that Lionel set around the tree, whatever. Somebody starts somewhere with a cheap train set, and they evolve and they grow and mature in the hobby. To me, operations is that final piece you put together when you've tried all those other things. Then you try to master, first understand, and then participate in and master some kind of operations for your model railroad.
Rick, when you hear the St. Louis RPM was focusing on operations, what made that feel like a natural fit for OPSIG?
Well, I was very excited when I talked with Lonnie about it. I think it's a good opportunity for OPSIG. And to Lonnie's point, OPSIS is the hobby within the hobby. It's an extension, and it's making your railroad do something more than just running in a circle, more than being a beautiful layout with scenery. It's focusing on the railroad having a purpose. Cars are moving on, cars are moving off, customers are being serviced. You're dependent upon what your operating schema is, your car forwarding system, your train movement system. You're really getting more into the simulation aspect of a real railroad and what they do.
It's a great answer.
Thanks.
Lonnie, for you, what does operations have to do with prototype modeling? Where do you see like the obvious connection between the two, and how does one enhance the other?
Kind of following up on what Rick said, a railroad has a purpose. Your layout should have a purpose. And if you understand what your railroad, your prototype railroad did, then you need to learn how that works with the signaling, communication systems, the purpose, what they did. And so the more you study your prototype, I think the better off your operating sessions will be.
Yeah, let's talk about that study, Rick, about learning more about the prototype. What are some things that are important in that process of establishing operations on a layout that you can get from that prototypical research?
Well, the prototypical research it depends on what you're modeling, where you're modeling. I can say for myself, because I model Southern Pacific, the human capital that's out there, the people that I can talk to that work for the Southern Pacific, is becoming less and less and less. Kind of like when you want to talk to a World War II veteran, there aren't too many around anymore. And so you dive into paperwork, you talk to the museums, you read books. My railroad was designed using what are called Southern Pacific spins diagrams, which is Southern Pacific Industrial Numbering System, which is how they identified the industries, which those books come with a track plan as well. And so it identifies the industries and it identifies how that trackage is used. And then you look at what are the methods that the prototype uses. Now, it's a model railroad, so there are always going to be some compromises that you're not going to be able to replicate identical to what the prototype is. And then you have to, as you build an operational layout, you also need to take into account your operators and what are they capable of, what are they not capable of. Some people hear timetable train order and they turn white because they're so scared of it. And it's really not a difficult thing once you start and once you're immersed into it. But and to go on a side note, I'm going to tell you that when I schedule ops sessions, one of my things is at least once a quarter, I want to have one new operator come and operate on my railroad. So they're learning. So I'm propagating the hobby as well. But to your point, sometimes it's difficult to do the research. I model 79 to 84, which I call a historical void. I can't find a lot of good pictures in books because the pictures in books are of steam era stuff, right? The steam era, transition era is probably the most popular thing modeled. Modern stuff, buildings have changed. And so that's where you get into what I call railroad archaeology, where you're trying to figure that out, whether it's on Google Earth or it's using reference pictures, maps, whatever. I've got a whole selection of Thomas Brothers maps, if you remember those. Well, they included the railroads on them, so it actually worked out really well. So for me, that's kind of cool because it's this whole evolution that you go through trying to figure it all out. And I will say one thing that the OPSIG has is we have an industry database, which you can look in by location and you can start to figure out what industries were served and what railroads served that. Now it's not 100% complete, but there's a ton of information. So as an example, on my railroad, I'm in the San Joaquin Valley in California shipping produce. Well, I have a car that's being routed to Gamble Robinson in Minneapolis, Minnesota, which was a produce distributor. So there I can add some realism. Do my crews care that it's going to Gamble Robinson? Not really, but it's part of the modeling for me that makes it a little bit more realistic.
I know that RPM attendees and operators obviously can be one and the same, but for you, Lonnie, when you hear all this, for the typical RPMer, do you believe they can appreciate the research that goes into that type of in-depth prototypical operations?
I think they appreciate the research. My guess is most RPMers do not fully comprehend operations, the various kinds, what to do with it. More of them are modelers, perhaps layout builders, but certainly modelers. And to take it to the step where Rick is talking, I don't think they're there yet. A lot of them are, but the majority are not.
So is that your hope that with this tie-in that will help bring people towards operations?
Yes, very much so.
And what do you think they're going to be able to get out of that?
Well, when I set this up and I worked with some others outside of our team and outside of that of Rick's, and also John Young with the Layout Design Group, who's with us also, and said, I want this to be like College 101. So you start in the morning, you're getting the very basics on any topic, and by the end of the day, particularly day 2, you've been exposed to every clinic that takes you from running a train in a circle to timetable train orders, as an example. And so they can get what they want out of it, and they can pick and choose where they want to go for CTC panels or whatever, but it's all there. They just need to go to the classes.
You mentioned a few years ago that you joined OPSIG. You've been connected with OPSIG and learned about operations. What has operations done for you personally and your layout?
In the one I'm building in my home, it has totally changed how I would do something. I like running train in circles, in fact, great big circles, but I know that to have fun with that, to have the challenge of taking it to a different step, you've got to have an end to that train's route and a purpose for the train going from point A to point B. And that's a lot of fun to go through the books and say, what do the real railroad do at that time and place? What was open? What did they haul? When did they do that? And the history of it is fascinating.
Rick, what Lonnie's describing here, is that really one of the goals of OPSIG, to be able to, in a sense, turn somebody who has all of that but hasn't taken that next step of, or maybe not even the next, maybe that lateral step or added or enhanced it or whatever. How would you describe that?
Well, I think what we want to do is allow everybody the opportunity to determine or expand their interest in the hobby and operations. As I mentioned, I see it as a hobby within the hobby, no different than if you're a scenery guy. But what we want to do is provide a mechanism for the new guys, the guys who are, hey, I don't know, I don't understand ops, I'm very intimidated. We want to provide a less intimidating environment so they can be introduced to it. But I also want to encourage those newbies to talk to other people that are into operations. Most people that are hosting sessions on the railroad are more than happy to bring a newbie in and allow that newbie to have that experience. And then many times the hook is caught, right? They get excited, they want to learn more, they want to attend more sessions. My own personal journey was very similar to that. And when I describe operations to the people that don't get or don't even know much about trains, where I really tell them is you're solving a puzzle. And they're just like building a jigsaw puzzle. You know there's an end to it. It's how do you put all those pieces together to solve that puzzle? And so one goal is that when an op session completes, they're mostly done or completely done with their job. So they walk away with a sense of success and that they had a good time. And those are going to bring those people back, and that hopefully they're going to tell somebody else that they know. And one of the things that we need to work on in the hobby overall as a generality is we need to bring more younger modelers in. And so that's one of the things that we're trying to look at from an OPSIG perspective. How do we gamify it a little bit more to make it more interesting for those younger audiences that are really into games?
Do you think that's where the relatability lies, is within that simulation portion of the model railroading for many?
I think so. I think so. There's the people that have been doing ops for a long time are into it because it's a strategy game, right? And that would be the gamification side of it. Is really what's the strategy? How can you go about getting it done? But if we're looking to appeal to those younger audiences, we're looking at how do we make it more like a game, and how do we characterize that? And to tell you the truth, I don't have the right answer on that one yet. it's a very difficult question. But what we want to do is we want to be open and inclusive too. Growing up, I worked at a hobby shop as a teenager, and I remember seeing those guys at clubs. Oh, you kid, you don't know what you're talking about. And we need to get rid of that. We don't need to be those old, crotchety old guys. We need to be very inclusive for the younger audiences. And hey, the guy who's in his 30s, he's got his career going, he's got his family established. Now he's looking for a hobby. That's a great opportunity for somebody to get pulled into the hobby.
Lonnie, it sounds what Rick is describing is a little bit of the gatekeeping that seems to happen in the hobby from time to time. Talk about how RPMs help alleviate that problem with gatekeeping and the inclusiveness of an RPM overall.
I think the makeup of any RPM is this open room with a lot of models on tables. Often there are chairs. You can sit down with the model builder and they want to show and tell, and you can ask questions. So whether that model is finished or it's in the earliest stages, there it is. And you can ask the person building it, how do they do that? What adhesive do they use? How do they cut that? Do you use this tool? All of those things. And RPMs are, I think by definition of their culture, very much oriented to doing that with anybody that walks in the door. You just hope you have the right mix of those that are kind of experts with those that, to Rick's point, are getting started, need a hobby, and have an interest in it.
What is it about the format, Lonnie, that really helps that compared to, say, other events where conventions or other sort where it's done differently? Talk about the RPM model and how that helps with the inclusiveness as well.
We hope it's more laid back, that when you go to the area with the models, it's a little quieter, fewer people, nothing like a big train show where a stroller's going by and, there's stacks and stacks of trains for sale. Not that they don't have trains for sale or lots of people, but there's just something about the ambiance of an RPM event that leads itself to conversation with strangers.
The St. Louis RPM is known for teaching, and one of the nice things about it, the learning stations, and there are several. But let's talk about it in the aspect of operations. I know, Rick, you've got a play in that with OPSIG. Talk about the things that you're hoping to teach at the St. Louis RPM.
Well, Lonnie's arranged a number of clinics with a number of notable people. I'll be presenting on car forwarding and train movement systems. So how are you getting your traffic across the railroad or on and off the railroad? And we'll end up having a table, and we'll be available for consulting with people as well to answer some of those questions. I think the clinics, having looked at them, I think it's going to span a very nice range of interest for those people. Yet there are also still clinics about prototype modeling as well. So Lonnie's done a great job at folding ops related clinics in as well as modeling clinics. So it should satisfy a very large audience.
When somebody leaves there, hopefully what they're going to be able to do is have some information on getting started with ops. But for somebody who hasn't started because they're not even sure about the starting point or won't even address it because they're not sure where it is, let's talk about a simple starting point for operations that could get that interest rolling even before they land in St. Louis.
So I would say reach out to other modelers in your area. If you're a member of the NMRA, go to a local division meet. Facebook, great place. Not everybody's on Facebook, but there are a lot of model railroaders on and a lot of groups. And honestly, that's how I've harvested some new operators, if you will. And one guy said, well, how do I get into one of these special operating groups? And I said, all you have to do is ask. And he's been coming to sessions on my layout now for well over a year. So again, as I'd said earlier, those hosting really want to get new operators involved. I think part of it is just getting people to ask. Talk to other modelers in your area. You can even go to a local club. A lot of the clubs are very interested. Maybe it's part of the recruitment process. There's the Fremo modular group. They do a lot of operations on the Fremo setups. So it's reaching out. As a matter of fact, I just came back from an event called River Rail in Wisconsin, where I spent 3 days operating on different layouts. And I actually, because I've been operating for a long time, called some friends in Minneapolis and set up sessions there while I was traveling. So it's a great community. And so I think the benefit of being involved with the RPM is now we can introduce the prototype modelers, who are fantastic modelers, to the operations community as well. So kind of melding them together in a sense.
Lonnie, I think one of the underplayed portions of the St. Louis RPM is the unofficial events that go around the social aspect of the St. Louis RPM. And Rick mentions talking to other folks and getting information from them. And there seems to be quite a few opportunities in and around the St. Louis RPM to make that happen. Talk about the social aspect and the connections that it makes year after year for 19 years now.
I think that part of it is incredibly important. A person that goes there first time, 10th time, whatever, they need to leave thinking that they've cast their dollar vote, so to speak, and had a good time, that they've made some friends, that they've learned something. Socially, to accomplish that, I think you need to have events that take place outside of that immediate area and different kinds. So we start by saying, if by chance you're coming in on Thursday evening, and far more RPMers come early and stay for 2 days than those that show up for a day or a half day or something. So we have hundreds that show up on Thursday evening and they go to Bandana's Barbecue. All we do is say, here's the place, here's the time frame. You're going to find 100 or more people there. Welcome to say hi to somebody. And they do that. They meet their old friends. They make new friends. And then that evening, both on Thursday evening and Friday evening, we have what's called an RPM roundup. The hotel at the Doubletree pays for the appetizers on Friday evening after we shut down the regular event, have our keynote speaker and so forth. So it's a place where the attendees know they're going to find a lot of exhibitors, model makers, attendees in general there, and then go in and have a snack or have a refreshment and kibitz. Then the other part of that is the home layout tours. And now we've added ops sessions in the last 2 years. So you can get in a car, grab a map, go to these places and ask questions and meet people that are walking around looking at the layouts like you. That's what comes to mind as being something outside of a clinic, outside of an exhibition room or a model display area.
Lonnie, why don't you walk us through the event from Thursday evening through Saturday and what one can expect on the official roster and the official event plan for the St. Louis RPM?
First, I'd do a commercial and say, please go to the website. It's all laid out there because you'll forget whatever I say. But hundreds show up somewhere around 5 o'clock on Thursday. They check into their hotels. They go to Bandanas or elsewhere. They get a map and they go to the layouts. Then just as many come back to the DoubleTree by Hilton and there and go to the lounge and meet people. Friday morning, they line up. We open the doors at 9 for attendees. Before that, for exhibitors to set up and so forth, and for early entry modelers to bring in their wares. And it goes all day long till about 5 o'clock. We often have another hour where they can hang out, where the exhibitors are closed down. There aren't any clinics. And if they don't choose to leave for dinner, they can go into the model display room and find some people sitting around. On Friday evenings, in addition to more of the layout tours, we sometimes have operating sessions, which are mostly focused on Thursday night this year, but they can go out to dinner, and then we encourage them to come back at 7 for our keynote speaker. And what I tried to envision and develop in the concept of keynote speaker is just like any other conference in the industry. That speaker sort of ties together the theme that year and talks in a broad basis about something. If we had grain industry one year or coal industry, we might invite speakers in from the real industry to talk about where coal is at that time. And that presentation lasts about an hour. This year we have Tony Custer. When it came to operations and someone that's popular and has promoted that for decades, Tony first came to mind. So I called and asked him if he would be our keynote speaker, and he agreed graciously. So Tony's the one we'll listen to this year to get his perspective on his life and operating and his view of that part of the hobby.
So, Rick, from the OPSIG perspective, what has Tony meant to realistic model operations?
Tony made it a little bit more mainstream, if you will. He wrote about it a lot in the magazines, and so we really got that exposure. He's written books. He's very notable. He's a very engaging guy. Really helped to promote that aspect of the hobby and get more people thinking about it. And so, again, you could say it's actually a fellowship activity too, because you're building relationships, you're building friends as part of that ops community.
Tony's been a very notable person within the model railroading hobby and a lot of contributions both into, as you mentioned, operations, but also a key contributor to the railroad prototype modeler meets, not only in St. Louis, but across the country. And that has earned him a recognition. Why don't you talk a little bit about that, Lonnie?
We are going to have this year, for the first time, an award, the St. Louis Modelers Community Award for someone, in this case, how to define it, it's someone who has gone above and beyond the normal duty of volunteering and has brought to the hobby, in some aspect, if not many, contributions that have helped nurture the hobby. In Tony's case, it's the hobby in general. He's been involved with publications that bring the beginner into the hobby and publications that take you to the point where you're talking about operation and fine model building. So we thought he would be a great person to start that award for the first year. This award, which this year we're giving it to one, in the future we might give it to 2 or 3 or 4 in 1 year. There's a lot of people out there that deserve it. And I think that we look at it from our perspective, and particularly me, that I've been a volunteer for something most of my life in other aspects in the hobby. And I appreciate when people volunteer, whether it's at church or school, in the community, whatever, or their hobby. And for all the accolades we get for having the RPM that we do, I can tell you it would not exist if I didn't have this team I worked with of volunteers, if we didn't have all of the clinicians, all of the model builders, all of these people that do what they do to bring us all together. It's the old one man is not an island. And so I felt grateful to these people and wanted to start this award, which I think is industry-wide, certainly RPM-wide, and we'll give this award in the future to people that maybe have never been to St. Louis, but have done a great deal for the hobby one way or the other.
Talk about what makes the RPM better by committee versus having a single person running it, other than the fact that Lonnie, you wouldn't be standing up if it was just you. You'd be laying flat, I would imagine. But talk about the importance of being able to have a committee input to running this and how that's helped the St. Louis RPM grow.
I think in any organization, while a few people do most of the work, those people bring different talents to that group. In our group, almost all of them have played important roles in other organizations, Boy Scouts, car collectors, ham radio operators, you name it. And they bring that skill set about how they make that interest better to our group. I don't want to be, I've got the title of president because the bank wanted somebody to sign something. Beyond that, they all contribute. A couple of them work 100 hours a year and do it. Some are there mostly for certain jobs at certain times of the year. I wouldn't do it without a team. If one or two key people left, I don't think I'd rebuild it. I think I'd walk away. We need each other that much.
Rick, you mentioned that last year was your first RPM meet that you attended. What were your thoughts going into it? What did you expect to see?
Well, that was interesting because I wasn't sure what to expect. I actually expected, or I guess I thought that, some people might be unapproachable. Not knowing what the quality of models were, my expectations were high that they would be good, but I was blown away by the quality of the models, the engagement of the people. I met and made new friends, manufacturers some of who are phenomenal modelers as well, were incredibly engaging, incredibly talkative. I went to some great clinics. I learned some things that I hadn't known, answered some questions, or dotted some I's, crossed some T's. Lonnie talked about going out for a barbecue. Went out Thursday and had barbecue. Fortunately, I got there early, so I didn't have to wait in the 50 to 100 person line at the barbecue place. Went to an ops session and hung out with a bunch of guys. The Doubletree Hotel Bar or Lounge
I was cleaning it up.
was an important. There you go. Was an important place, and there were a lot of great discussions that went on there, and it was so. For somebody who's considering whether they want to go or not, don't be intimidated by it. It's a very open experience. People are really glad to talk to you. They're really glad that you're there. So I could say that's why I ended up. I'd already booked my trip to come for this year prior to any engagement with Lonnie, as far as presenting and getting the OPSIG engagement. So I was really satisfied after last year, and so that motivated me to come back.
We left off on Friday night. Let's go back to the schedule, Lonnie. Why don't you tell us what happens on Saturday at the St. Louis RPM?
There's more of the same and a few added features. So everyone's welcome in the building at 9 a.m. Clinics start as they do on Friday at 9:30 and run till about 4:30. The exhibit hall with all the vendors and historical societies and models open at 9 and stay open till 5. We have started last year food service trucks, which I know is popular throughout the country at all kinds of events. You don't have to go to many convention centers before you soon learn the food's just not very good. So these places have started to say, we're not making money at this. People need to eat. Go ahead and invite the county approved, health department recommended food service trucks of your choice. So we have 3 or 4 of those. Food's delicious. Absolutely delicious. So that's there for midday. We go through more of the presentations. And then around 4:30, we have a door prize event that seems to keep 300 or 400 people there the entire time. We ask each exhibitor, we don't charge a lot for the exhibitors, try to keep the costs low so we get beginning exhibitors and nationally known companies, but we ask each of them to give us a gift of a product they make or service they provide and put it on the table. Everyone that comes in the door gets a ticket they put on their ID badge. So that's how we know if we had 900 or 1,000 people, because everybody gets a ticket that's numbered. And then we simply go through there and draw ticket numbers out until the last gift is given. There's usually a couple hundred prizes, and that seems to delight people. A lot of the vendors and exhibitors are standing there waiting to see if they win. Others are tearing down, but we don't have a problem of people tearing down early because the crowds stay until the last minute. I don't know that it's because of the giveaways, but they all stay, keep buying, keep asking questions, keep showing their models till the end. And then about 5:30, it's all over. We start planning for the next year.
We discussed earlier about the why between having OPSIG and operations involved with the St. Louis RPM. I want to get into the how a little bit. Lonnie, tell us how this all started and how OPSIG became involved.
Well, I will do that, and then I want to refer to Rick as well. I'd say that when I envisioned this a year ago, if not 2 years ago, that this would be the year to do operations, before I really mentioned it to the team, I knew that I didn't know that much about it, and I only knew some of the leaders in each organization. So I reached out to Rick and to John Young with Layout Design, and also to the local NMRA, and said, I need some help on this. I need to know who the people are that are well-written, respected, knowledgeable on any of these topics. Because just as I think Rick made the reference to, just as the World War II veterans are disappearing, you can't find the railroad experts as you did. I also know that in the area of operations, it's such a vast topic that you need a lot of help to even know, what do you cover? What are the topics that you cover? So I called Rick, and he was more than gracious to say, I'd love to be a part of it. And he extended their resources beyond the national conference, which is coming up about the same time. And John Young did the same thing for LDSIG. It turns out that the NMRA local division, the Gateway division, is having their own meet at the same time. So they're buying admission tickets through us, and that's going to be a bunch more people there. But I know that I could not have done this the way it's been laid out without Rick's help and that of John. Big kudos to them for all that they've done to help.
Rick, they say less is more, but in this case, more seems to be more. And there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of groups between OPSIG and LDSIG and the Gateway division. And of course, Lonnie's team with the St. Louis RPM all coming together to make all this happen. Talk about how all this coordination is working for you folks.
For us, it's been pretty easy. Lonnie, we worked with Lonnie on setting up what those presentations are. We brainstormed on topics and then honed that down as to what we wanted to cover. We've touched base with the LDSIG guys to find out what theirs, and it's really kind of to Lonnie as talked about earlier, starting like a college 101 and then moving up. So we're trying to lay some of the groundwork, right? So that's why the LDSIG guys are there, because they're helping you with layout design so you can design your layout more for operations. We have a number of people from the OPSIG that are going to present about different aspects of operations. And I will be honest with you, I don't think everybody's going to walk away from there going, oh, I'm an ops expert now. No. More of, hey, we've given you the introduction, so now you need to, what we can do to help follow up and get you more involved, help you evolve your layout, and get involved in the community. The RPM community is a really tight-knit community. That was my impression. They know each other, but they're willing to share. And so they're tight-knit is from a communication standpoint, but they're open to new people. I sat down with people last year, even in the contest room. We talked about techniques on models and building. And so I would hope that we end up with something similar from an operations perspective. And maybe Lonnie ends up doing it and more advanced operations next year. I don't know how that's going to work out. I think it's going to be based on some of the feedback that's provided and what we see, there on the ground. Hopefully, OPSIG membership will go up too, by the way.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And what I'm hearing Rick say, Lonnie, it seems like it's from a bunch of different angles here. It's not just operations, but it's all the things around operations itself and the support, like you mentioned, layout SIG, and even prototype research that ties into both modeling and operations. It sounds like it's all going to be covered there within the aspects of the St. Louis RPM.
I think so. I think if you go to our website, open the tabs that describe the presenters and their topics, as well as the titles, you'll learn a lot more about what each class will bring to the table. And I think you'll figure out that while we may not have covered every aspect of operations, we've certainly covered all of the highlights, whether it's a car forwarding or a timetable train order or using a CTC panel, even one on ergonomics. How do you build that layout so it's comfortable when you use it? And people that say before you drive the first screw or nail, learn this. And so I think we've covered many of the aspects of that. For me, in this part, I have to confess that although we went from 20 clinics to 30 clinics with the addition of another clinic room, which should increase my work by 50%, I think it was actually easier for me this year, thanks to Rick and his team and John and his team, because they brought me half of the 12 or 15 clinics that deal with that topic of the 30 that we have. And, they're vetted. I know these people are good, know their topics. I hear some of them at other RPMs. So that part was easier, even though we grew a lot in that. And many thanks again to Rick and his team.
For someone who's listening to this that says, well, I love going to an RPM, but operations aren't for me. Either they tried it or have just simply dismissed it and decided that's just not something they're interested in doing. What can they get out of this year's St. Louis RPM?
My own team calls me PT Barnum. I want something for everybody. I think that to grow the hobby, to grow RPMs in a productive and measurable way, you need to provide more than any one aspect of it. I don't want a train show. We have lots of exhibitors. I don't want models only. My attendance would drop to a fraction of that. Clinics only, same issue. So when you go to the clinics, as an example, if we have 30, I usually don't have more than half that deal with the theme for that year. The other half are the traditional, let's build models, let's build structures, could be scenery, electronics, painting, a number of things that go along with the hobby. So people, if they don't want to go to something on operations, here's something else in those two other rooms.
Let's talk about the learning stations. I know personally I'm a big fan of the learning station, but talk about someone who comes to an RPM and how a learning station can get them that one-on-one information and that feedback you just can't get from a YouTube video.
For me, I first discovered the concept at an industry event in my profession, and you could show up earlier before the other conferences started, go down a hallway, and each classroom had someone. You could go in there and be almost one-on-one, whatever that topic might be. And so I took that and said, let's put that in our main floor, put up banners so they can identify those people that are volunteering. Again, they're volunteers for their time. Maybe they have a skill set, maybe they have a product or a service, and sit down with them one-on-one and learn. We have consistent return of people like the weathering shop, that Oak Hill Model Railroad Supply that talk about track laying every year. Soundtracks or someone from that technology comes in. We usually have someone with equipment, like it could be CTC panels or spray compressors, that sort of thing. So when you sit down, they'll sit down with you and you can push buttons and try things and learn. People seem to love the weathering shop. So we give them a vast array of tables, lighting, and they come and go all day long. And there's 4 of them that show up pretty consistently each year. And they too are great volunteers.
I know learning is a big part of what OPSIG does, and we had Paul Weiss on here to tell us about the achievement program. Why don't you tell us about that again, and then what you hope to see with the achievement program after all of this participation at the St. Louis RPM?
Hopefully, we kicked off an achievement program just over a year ago, and what we wanted to do was create a mechanism where people could get an award for their for their expertise in different disciplines. So we've got dispatcher, we've got conductor and engineer, we've got author, layout host, operating sessions coordinator. There's 14 different disciplines that are out there, including one for a railroader. So if you're a professional railroader, you can qualify to earn a merit badge. And when you achieve 8 or more, you get a designation called Operations Ninja. And the whole idea between this Ninja program is that so now I can go, I as an Operations Ninja have some provenance so that if I go to an operating session somewhere, I have some qualifications, I have a skill set that I've demonstrated. And so it's been really successful. To date, in just over a year, we've given out 700 awards. We've had 300 recipients participating. We've made 24 ninjas. we created something called key helper. So everybody who's building a layout, or many people, have this one guy who's their go-to guy who helped them get the layout going, and it wouldn't have been there without them. That's a key helper. So that key helper doesn't even have to be an OPSIG member. The person nominating them has to be, but if they're not an OPSIG member, it's a way for them to be acknowledged as a helper. And then we've actually been given a real good propagation of the host award. So somebody who's hosting ops sessions. And we've got members in the US, Canada, Australia, United Kingdom, and even Norway that are participating in this program. So the global outreach has been fantastic, and we're really seeing a lot of momentum. And it's be honest, we have some ebbs and flows, right, with any program. And one of the other things that we really wanted to focus on was, as I mentioned, it's a hobby within a hobby. And so we within the NMRA MMR program, you have the chief dispatcher that you can get, but we wanted to be a little bit more specific to operations and all of the aspects of operations. So this is really ops focused, and we didn't want to take away or compete with the MMR program. We respect it. I'm actually working on my MMR as well. We wanted to create this as something within the OPSIG. And then last thing I'll say, we've called it the Ninja program. Most people like it. They get it. It's a little bit of sense of humor. Some industries, you have a qualification that you are a ninja. And then I've had a couple people that said, well, I'd really like to get involved, but I didn't like the name. I'm like, well, I'm sorry. We've got to do something to move this thing forward. So, that's what we decided as a team. And so far, it's been really successful.
Excellent. Great program to get people involved with operations and turn that operations focus and be recognized for the things that and continuous learning within operations. So after all of our conversation here about the St. Louis RPM and the involvement with OPSIG and LDSIG and all the other folks that are involved in Lonnie's incredible team, and after everything else we discussed, let's answer that question one more time. Lonnie, why do operations belong at a railroad prototype modelers meet?
Operations, by definition, to me, is taking your model railroad or the real railroad to a level that mimics the prototype. So you can build nice models, have beautiful layouts, have the sound, all the things go with it. But if you're not growing to that level that it looks like you're running that, like a real railroad would run it or did run it, then you're missing out on some of the opportunity, the fun. It's our version of gaming, to Rick's point earlier. I think that it's a natural for us to explore that. It's a natural for everybody to want to go there to some level.
And Rick, for OPSIG, why does it seem so natural and fit hand in hand to be working with the St. Louis RPM on this?
Well, I think to Lonnie's point, it's part of that evolution of the model railroad. If you've got these finely detailed models that are accurate to the prototype, how can we make it so that you can operate your railroad just like the prototype? So I think it dovetails nicely, provides an education process for those folks that might be intimidated by ops and a way to get them going. Because, as I said earlier, you've heard a lot of things and may not be ready to jump into the deep end of the pond, but let's help you do that.
Lonnie, why don't you give us all the details of what we need to know about planning our trip to St. Louis?
Go to our website. The hotels tab is there. We have group rates and group room reservations. Anything about, you can call up a local area code and a prefix that takes you to the desk at that hotel in almost every case. So you're getting directly involved with the room reservation. It's located in the central part of the U.S. Whether you fly into St. Louis, take Amtrak there, or just drive a car, you can go 5 hours in any direction and touch Wisconsin, Indiana, Ohio, Kentucky. You can get over to Kansas. So we're in a good spot. Jump in the car and come and see us.
Excellent. For those that want to learn more about OPSIG, Rick, where can they find that information?
You can find the OPSIG at www.opsig.org, and they can reach out to me if they have questions at president@opsig.org. I'm happy to answer anything.
And of course, we'll share all the links on our website, aroundthelayout.com/248. I am looking forward to being out in St. Louis, combining two of my favorite things, operations and the St. Louis RPM. I think it's going to be an absolute great time to be able to explore not only the beautiful prototype modeling done by so many from around the country and some from around the globe. I know some of our folks from Australia will be joining us as well there. And then talking about bringing those models to life with operations. It is a perfect fit, and I'm looking forward to seeing both of you. Until then, Lonnie and Rick, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ray. Had a great time.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Around the Layout. Learn more about today's episode, check out past shows, and much more on our website, aroundthelayout.com. Show your support by becoming an operating crew member at aroundthelayout.com/crew. Follow us on social media, aroundthelayout.com/social. And send us your feedback, aroundthelayout@gmail.com. Thanks for hanging out with us around the layout.